Hello everyone. Today I am going to talk to you about doing some drawing from real life, how to break down basic everyday objects so that you can communicate your idea visually clearly. So there's a few of the art mantras that I like to refer to when I am working from real life, and these are kind of the basics for everything when I'm working from real life. So the first one is working general to specific. So I'm going to show you how to break it down into directional lines and then basic shapes. And then we're going to work the whole, then the parts. So then what we're going to do is from those basic shapes and directional lines, we're going to put together that object, its curves, things like that. So we're going to make changes to those general shapes that we are doing. And then the last thing is we're going to add a little bit of shading to this. So we are going to consider this like a cave. So anything that goes back into space is going to be dark. So darks recede, lights pop out. Anything that's coming out at us is going to be closest to us. So these three mantras are going to help us today when we are mapping out our general shapes and then working more specifically and adding shading to develop the object that we're trying to capture. So the first thing that I'm going to show you how to work with here is I just have your basic tape dispenser here. And what's nice about this is it is pretty much just kind of a rectangle. You can see that it kind of fits into this rectangular space. But there are different curves and directional lines that go in different directions. So I'm going to show you how to use those lines to help map this out to capture its shape more accurately. So the first thing I like to do is mapping out my composition. I need to know where I start and finish. So this kind of comes at an angle here, and this kind of comes at an angle up like this. So I know approximately how big on my page this needs to be. You can do this in pencil, you can do this in pen. I'm doing this in marker so that you can see what's going on my page here. So after I kind of have the general direction, then I can start making changes to the object here so that I can see where I need to build up those basic areas. So this comes at a direction here. This cuts in, kind of curves down and up, and it's okay if my lines are wrong. You can see I have some of my mapping lines out here, and I have that basic shape built in. Now I can go in and I can start getting more specific. So there's this line in here that recedes into space, so I can kind of fill this in, make that a little darker. I have this kind of space in here where the tape dispenser rests, and I can see kind of the bottom here. And I have my tape roll right here. So I kind of map out that area. It doesn't matter if there's lines between that I can see through because I'm going to fill some of this in. So here's the inside kind of triangular piece that holds the tape in space. And I can kind of build up those circles, changing that area that I need to. And this is nice and dark. It's inside the circle, so I can fill that in. Same thing here, that as we go down into space, I can use some hatching lines here to show that this recedes back into the distance. And building up my tape roll, I can change my lines. And again, because of some of the shading that I'm building up in this space, it doesn't matter if I can see some of my lines through here. So I can make these changes, and I can curve my lines more correctly, more accurately. This is the space at the top here, so I'm going to break it down into a rectangle. I can change this so that it meets up here. That comes down. And this here is not very parallel, so I want to bring it more parallel to the top here. And I might need to change my line here a little bit, and that's okay, because then I can change my line here. And I can bring those lines further across so I know which ones I need to use. Really building up that area. And this is kind of going back into space here, so I can show a little bit of shading there. This dips down too, so I can kind of show some shading marks in here, and I'm just using lines because this is just a Sharpie marker. This kind of goes back into space as well. And so you can try this with a pen even, and it doesn't matter if you have all these extra lines because you're trying to communicate your idea. So if you're changing this up here, even if you want to keep it the same, that's another kind of rectangle up there, and I have these teeth. So you can use basic lines to show that this is where the sharp edge is. And you can also start annotating, so you can put on there teeth, and your tape can kind of come from your tape circle here, and you can see like this is where it needs to cut that tape right there. So you have some of these extra lines, but then you can go back in, kind of giving a sense of ground almost, to then highlight your object in space here. So then you can make changes to make things a little more accurate and to start showing some shading on here too. So if you change the direction of your lines, that will also help show the shading on the object. So this is like high up into space here. This is a curve, so I'm going to curve my lines up like that so you can tell that this is going back into space here. And that's not going to be as dark as my line here because this is the deepest into space. So I can kind of make my lines the darkest underneath here to show that that is going down into space. So my drawing is actually very messy, and that's okay. Messy is a good thing. So you want to be able to draw very loosely and very lightly to begin with, and this isn't light because it's a Sharpie, but loosely and lightly, and then you can make changes along the way, because I have a tendency to erase and then make the same line, erase and make the same line, and then it's constantly wrong. All right, so when I make a mistake on here, and you saw that I did, like right here was a mistake, I made that change first, and then I can get rid of this. And obviously I can't with Sharpie, but I can because I'm building up my shading, shadows, things like that on the other part of the object. So we don't concentrate necessarily on that, but we concentrate on the whole. So another thing is more organic shapes. So this is pretty blocky, pretty regular. So if we were to take a pair of scissors here and we were to draw, and you want to make something more ergonomically correct, you want to have a hand element in there. So just like with the stapler, I am going to start general to specific. So I want my scissors to kind of come across in this direction here. They make almost kind of a triangular shape, very loose, very light. If it's not right, I made a change. And I can start with kind of the circles here. And then I can start making changes to the outside here. I can focus on that little button in there. Then I can attach it to the plastic. That plastic part comes at a straight edge here and around, and then you have your metal shears that come up from that component there, a nice edge where they meet. And honing in then, changing your lines so that they are more accurate to the actual drawing. And you can see I still have lots of messy extra lines here, but the focus then is on the lines that I've changed. So if I wanted to add a component to show a more human aspect to it, I could have the hand holding. The hand is pretty complex, it's pretty hard, but it's really simple to map out the hand. So if you have your hand like this, you literally can draw this kind of rectangle here. The thumb comes off of here, and your fingers kind of come in that direction here, and your wrist kind of comes off in that direction. So then you make changes to make it more human looking and not so square looking. So your first finger gets a little more rounded. It's got some creases in here. Thumb is a little creased. And just by adding kind of some of those curves to your fingers, to your hand, maybe some knuckles, all of a sudden your hand starts to look a little bit more accurate. If you need to place your hand like this, here is a basic shape to map out the hand. Your first fingers come in an arc across the top like this, knuckles, knuckles, and you draw each finger in these little circles, and then same thing with the thumb. It's got two that come off there. So changing this, starting with those basic shapes, helps again with the more human aspect for your drawings. My thumb comes around, comes to the wrist here. Maybe I have a watch on. All right, so it looks a little wonky right now, but this here should be the same size as this here, and that's how you would draw hands compared to your object so that you can show how people need to hold it. So if you were to draw, and I'm not a lefty with my scissors here, if you were to draw your scissors, your hand holding your scissors, so here's my side angle like this, and here's the shears that come off. So I'm going to draw my shears that come off here, and then I'm going to draw that hand component, and my thumb kind of comes through in this direction here, and then this finger wraps around the top here. So again, changing these to make them more circular, and here's my scissors handle, and it comes up here, and this is where it stops. Here's where the knob holds it together. I don't really see much of the underside here. I do see a little bit, so I can maybe draw that extra line there. But then here are my shears, and I can make an extra line because there's two blades, and my finger comes around the side here. Got a little fingernail here to hold the scissors, and the thumb comes through. So here's kind of the knuckle, and then my thumbnail down here. So it looks like I'm going through the hole of the scissors. And then my other fingers, they kind of come around this way, and another one kind of comes this way. So I kind of am breaking them down into basic shapes first, and you don't really see the last one here. So if you wanted to, you could color in the scissors handle so we know that that's the plastic component that you're referring to. And you can also do a little shading on your hand so we have some wrinkles from where we're gripping kind of coming underneath the scissors handle here, you know, and this finger comes underneath thumb, so I'm putting a little shading in underneath there. Same thing here, this is the underside of my finger, so I can add a little shading. And these are just lines, but they're lines in the direction of the shape that I am shading. So that's how you would draw your hand holding those scissors, just breaking down everything into basic shapes. And then you could do little annotations, so if you wanted to, you could put, and if you needed to, up here, the shears. Depends on how you're changing your object or what you want your viewer to understand from holding these scissors.